All right, good morning, everyone. Appreciate everybody coming. I'm Jeb Brady. I'm the building official. This is Katie Nunez, Director of Planning and Zoning. We got maybe a 2-hour presentation for you all on code update training to the 2021 code. Katie's going to go over a lot of information as far as zoning, RPA, setbacks, BZA, all that good stuff. So before we get going, I would love for everybody to stand up and introduce yourself and what company you're with, please. Start right there.
Zach Hammond, Mechanic Construction. Joey Cavallo, Schneider Construction.
Elise Schneider.
Yeah, you gotta stand. Chris Longmore, City Hall Homes. Jamie Hammond, Gateway Builders.
Dave Shuey, Landscape Architect.
Mary Doff Simpson, Simpson.
And Eichmann, Lindsay Studio.
Jim Schneider, Schneider Construction.
Ernie Colhurst, Ackers Construction.
Chris Carvalho, and Improvement Associates.
Christy Gross, Bradley.
Keith Cass, Kane Cass Construction.
Chelsea Philpott Construction.
Ed Wells, retired contractor and builder. Member of the zoning board.
Building Code Board of Appeals.
It's a new thing.
Howard and Susan Thibodeau, Vice President. Jeff Frampton, Bay Legacy Construction.
And Stephanie.
Laura Outland, Icon Construction.
Gary Shackle for Museum Resources Construction in Millwood.
Diane Davis, lifetime resident of Eastport, Deneker Home.
Reese Smith, Justin Holmes.
Mike Froller Construction.
Matt Froller Construction.
Ross Johnson, Froller Construction.
Bill Dyer, Village Builders.
Paige Simpson, Central Builders.
Howard Simpson, Simpson Builders.
Bonnie Casey, Terry Industries. Lauren Zito, Terry Industries.
Matt Thompson, Preserve Homes.
Austin Brady, Preserve Homes.
Travis Gaines, Preserve Homes.
In the back, Connie.
Connie Drummond, permit technician from Town Cape Charles.
Jack.
Jack Steinmeier, Zoning Compliance Officer.
Chrissy Allen, I'm with the Finance Department. My title's really long. Ann Doyle, Acmac Northampton Planning District Commission.
Arvin Peralak, also with the Planning Commission.
Rita Champlin, Planning Commission.
Mark, since you're a late arrival, Mark, just do a quick introduction.
Mark Essery, live here in Cape Charles.
There you go. Before we start, it's an open meeting. It is an informal meeting. There's coffee, donuts, fruit, juice, the whole works back there. The bathroom is down the small little hallway by Connie. So feel free, do what you need to do, get up, get more refreshments throughout the morning. Ask questions as we go through this today, so don't hesitate. Just be polite as we're doing this, and we will get to everything we possibly can. If we don't know an answer to one of your questions, we'll write it down and get it back to you. But we really want this to be informative for you. And if you did not pick it up, we've actually printed out the whole booklet today. It is on the back counter, looks like this. So you can take notes as we go along. My fault, because we put it in the wrong order, because I thought Jeb was going to go first. I'm actually going to go first, so my slides start in the middle of the booklet. So you got to look for the 411 on zoning, and that's where we're going to start this morning. Any questions so far? Okay, excellent. Well, we welcome you today. Thank you for taking the time. We recognize we have a varied audience here of a lot of contractors, because that's really what we were intentional in trying to gear this for. But we also open it up potentially to other town officials, residents, because in case they have additional questions. So we might have varied viewpoints coming in this morning. So just everybody bear with us as we go through the questions. So with that said, if you don't know, you're actually not required to have zoning in the state of Virginia. But if you do choose to have a zoning ordinance, there are certain requirements under the Code of Virginia to have zoning. And so we have provided you that information as to what the Code of Virginia requires if you're going to have zoning. They have lots of little bullets and statements of things we're supposed to be protecting and looking out for, the health, safety, welfare of our residents, how you have flow through the community, through traffic, deal with your health and water issues and sewer issues, all sorts of things that we have to address if you're going to have a zoning ordinance. So that's the long and short of it. I'm not going to go through all the particulars of that. In addition, if you choose to have a zoning ordinance, then you have to have some other things to help with that, which is, I have to have a planning commission. They have to take a role in adopting a comprehensive plan. They are not the ones that adopt it, but they are the ones that help develop it and manage it and recommend it back to the town council or the board of supervisors to adopt a comprehensive plan. In addition, you have to have a subdivision ordinance. So there are all sorts of requirements once you start putting in, yes, we choose to have zoning. Because I know that's what I hear a lot. I'm sure Jeb hears it a lot. If I didn't have zoning, I could do whatever I want with my property. You're absolutely correct. But this is a community that has chosen to have some management of how property is used, and with that comes these rules and regulations as to what you can do. And all of those get adopted through a public process. As I lastly said, the last organizational structure you have to have under a zoning ordinance is you have to have a board of zoning appeals, because you're not going to like some of the decisions that get issued by the various boards you have or staff that you have overseeing this. You always have a right of appeal. And so that, for the 9 times out of 10, is the body that all those appeals go to. Jeb has a different group that he does his appeals through if people don't like decisions that he makes as a building official, and he can talk about that under his presentation. But one of the things, if you don't know, in Virginia, we're known as a Dillon Rule state. And what that means is the locality may not exercise power other than that has been granted by the General Assembly. What this means is you don't have the right to do it if it wasn't expressly stated in the law for us to do that. So for example, well, it's there now, gambling is a bad one, but they finally have allowed gambling in Virginia. But that used to be my go-to example for a long time is you couldn't just have a casino in Virginia. You couldn't choose to put one in Cape Charles. But now there is some limited approvals coming out from the General Assembly for casinos to happen in Virginia. They're not everywhere. We just can't have one in Cape Charles right now, I can tell you that. But that's what I mean by a Dillon Rule state. If they haven't given us that express authority in the Code of Virginia, then we cannot do it as a locality. So when you look at our zoning ordinance, it's what we call a permissive ordinance in terms of we only tell you the things you can do. We don't give a list of things you cannot do. So if it's not listed as a use of by right or through a conditional use permit, sometimes referred to as a special use permit, then you cannot do it in our zoning ordinance. So I just want to make that really clear. I know it's not a typical term most people are aware of, but the Dillon Rule state really governs all of Virginia. And that is not just in Cape Charles, that is all the way over to the southwest corner to us, up to Fairfax, the whole works. So when did we get into the business of doing zoning? The town actually first adopted the subdivision ordinance in January of 1977. So up until then, all of this was what I would call a planned community. When the railroad chose to locate here and establish the town of Cape Charles, there actually was no laws that really oversaw that. Those were just some very smart individuals who were really good at laying out and knowing what they were trying to achieve when they established the town of Cape Charles. So we first came into that business, as I said, in '77. From there, the next thing that happened was there was a federal law that came into being that rippled down to the states called the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. That happened in 1989. It identified the localities that were within the watershed of the Chesapeake Bay Act and required them to start doing some things to protect the health and safety of the bay, because it was deemed in danger, in critical danger to many of the wildlife, the sea life that lived there. And they were requiring not just in Virginia, but it was Maryland, Delaware, actually even West Virginia falls into that. Pennsylvania is part of that, and even up into New York is part of the watershed for the Chesapeake Bay Act. So in Virginia, they required us to do several things that had to happen in every locality that was identified as a watershed into the Chesapeake Bay Act. And for us, that meant we had to adopt an erosion and sediment control ordinance. We first did that in 91 of June. I missed a step, I'm so sorry. We first actually adopted a map for the Chesapeake Bay Act for us. And if you're not aware, almost all of the town of Cape Charles is in some form or fashion within that map of the Chesapeake Bay Act. There are sections that are known as the Resource Protection Area, or RPA. You're going to hear that a lot from me this morning. That is identified on our map, and it basically runs about 100 feet from the average mean high water mark. And that's just not from the bay. It could be from the creeks or any tributaries that may eventually flow into the bay. So I'm going to pick on, in Bay Creek, Creekside. If you're not aware, Creekside is a tributary into the Chesapeake Bay Act. And so the properties that reside over in the Creekside Lane area all have RPA considerations that we have to attend to in developing them. So it's not just what might be over here on the Chesapeake Bay side. There's also something called the Resource Management, or RMA, of the Bay Act. That is, so let me back up. RPA 5 is 100 feet. I'm going to talk, I have a slide on this a little further down. It's 100 feet. The RMA is 500 feet. It has a different requirement and oversight and management. It's a less stringent requirement that we have to do under the RMA component. And then finally, there was an area that we had to map as well at the time of adoption of intensely developed areas. It's called IDAs. That's a term that gets used in government in different things, but in this capacity, it is the intensely developed areas. And what that meant is they wanted to capture anything that was located in that Chesapeake Bay watershed or RPA area where there was already intense development occurring that could not comply with this new federal law that was coming into existence. Things like the concrete plant did not have to comply and could continue to have development occur on that property in accordance to its use without having to comply with the Chesapeake Bay Act requirements. There were properties around the harbor area that got that designation of IDA from the town, as well as the marina up here at the oyster area, oyster farm area. So we have a map to show you later on, but I just wanted to make you aware of those provisions. We then finally adopted our first ordinance in 92, July 14th of 1992. That is a pivotal moment for the town, and it's important for us to keep that in mind as we look at zoning, because a lot of it comes back to, was that a use that happened then? Was it a term that you're going to hear that's nowhere, not found in the ordinance, but everybody says it. Was it grandfathered? Was it there before? We actually call that a vested right, or the other term that you're going to see in our ordinance, those other two terms, vested rights in a legal non-conforming lot. Those are the two areas that actually equate to what you might call as a vested right or a grandfathered use. So that's our zoning ordinance date is 92. Within that zoning ordinance, we incorporated a stormwater plan or stormwater ordinance, a site plan requirement, and floodplain administration. So that's the first time the town had all of those laws start to ripple in and require oversight. Since then, there have been some small additions along the way. We've added things relative to parking. We've added a tree ordinance, a tree and preservation ordinance to our document. I'm trying to think what else came in. Accessory dwelling units. Sign ordinance. So there have been some additions since then, but 92 is really the starting point for this town. The other trigger that really caused the town to kind of grow up is actually Bay Creek. That was really the impetus for many of these things getting addressed for the first time. Outside of the Chesapeake Bay Act, that was driving a lot of this, but the annexation of the Bay Creek property into the town of Cape Charles and the need to develop a governing doctrine overseeing its development as a planned unit development property really triggered the town getting all of its act together of getting zoning in place for the first time. And once we got the town side of zoning done, we actually then finished what is called the Accomack Plantation Planned Unit Development Zoning Ordinance. That is what governs Bay Creek, both at the south and the north of town. And that was adopted in February of 93. I know many of you are developers over in the Bay Creek area, and I constantly share with you and push you over to that direction. If you don't have a copy of the Accomack Plantation PUD, you should as developers. It's available on the town website under our planning department page. And actually, once we come out of our rezoning that we're doing right now for the town, we're going to be moving over to the PUD and doing some revisions to the PUD document with the Bay Creek property owners. So that's our next project in 2025, is to bring that one up to speed, because it substantially has not been changed since '93 either. So within a zoning ordinance, what are the tools that we have that help us enforce a zoning ordinance? The key documents that we look at is zoning districts, whether that's in the Bay Creek or in the town proper. Our zoning districts drive everything. They tell us, are we going to have this as a residential use primarily? Is it going to be for more commercial? So we have all those various districts with that. And there are tiers within, say, the commercial or residential. Some could be more intense or less intense depending upon what we're trying to achieve in those various districts. And so there's usually a statement of intent within each of our zoning districts. And then we roll into the uses by right, then the uses that are going to be through conditional use permits, and then lastly, accessory units or uses to the primary uses of the property. We also will define all of the setback requirements, heights, lot coverage are all those responsibilities within that component of your zoning ordinance. And we will also then address maybe some performance standards as part of that document. So those are all of our tools that we have available to us. We also, in Article 4, I think it's all sitting in Article 4 today, we have parking standards now. We have fence requirements. We talk about if you're going to have an accessory structure of any kind, we talk about those requirements, and that could include everything from the size it could be in relation to your primary structure to how much of a distance there needs to be between those two buildings on your property. We also will talk, if you're going to use an accessory structure as an accessory dwelling unit, we now allow that, but with certain criteria that must be adhered to follow that. We have landscape standards, sign requirements, outdoor lighting, and actually if you want to run a home business or home occupation from your residence, we also deal with that as well in Article 4. If you haven't seen that we are in the midst of doing a rezoning for the town, sorry, I need a little refresher. We are, and one of the big changes we're doing is actually to our sign ordinance, because what we had today currently on our books was not in compliance with federal law. Federal law changed in 2015 with a Supreme Court case that came out then, and it said our sign ordinance should not be based upon any sort of content-based regulation, meaning I shouldn't differentiate between a political sign versus some other type of sign, a real estate sign that's happening in town. The only considerations under a zoning ordinance as it relates to signs should be based upon size, frequency a sign is there, placement on its property in relation to any impediments to the traffic or public community access onto property or onto the road system. But we cannot do anything with relative to content. So we have been, part of this process has been trying to revamp our entire sign ordinance to come in compliance with that requirement. It is long overdue. Also, one of the tools is variances, because there are some properties that were developed way back when this town was founded that may not meet our standards today. And so we have variances to give us that ability to respond to those challenges on a property. And then lastly, other things that we also oversee under our zoning ordinance is all the other fun things that come on a property if you happen to be located near the water. If you want docks or piers or beach walkways, we have to deal with that as to how we're going to use them, permit them, and a lot of them have jurisdiction with federal laws that we are required to enforce for the town. So that is actually found in our Appendix C, Appendix E, and Article 7 of the zoning ordinance. And that deals everything with the Chesapeake Bay Act, the Wetlands Act, Coastal Sand Dune Act. I don't think I've missed anything. So, from there, now I've told you all the tools that we have in our zoning ordinance, all the things that we oversee. So, you're going to ask, do I need a zoning permit? Yes. Actually, you're going to need a zoning permit more than you need a building permit. Because on Jeb's world, there are certain components of building that are exempt under the building code, and he's going to go through those with you, or mention a few of those. But in my world, any use of your property, use doesn't necessarily mean just a building. Even if you want to throw a party on your property in a long-term basis, meaning you want to have an outdoor, I don't know, nudist colony. We'll put that out there. Why not? You're going to be seeing me to see if that is a use allowed under our zoning ordinance. So yes, redevelopment or development of any kind requires zoning approval. It could be a simple form that gets filled out and we can sign off and send you on your merry way. Or it could be a little more detailed in response and review depending upon all the components of your project that you're seeking. If you're looking to add to an existing structure or take away some of what's there and do a new addition, all of that is going to require review for zoning. Some of this in the historic district has a whole nother level of review that has to be considered. And so that is a body that's been created by this town about the historic district. We're going to go a little bit further into that as well. And in particular, one of the challenges in the commercial district that I want to just touch upon is C1, which is our primary commercial district in town, is located the primary stretch of Mason Avenue, all the way down to the beachfront, mostly. You'd think, well, that's easy. Of course, if we put in a business, that's a no-brainer. Why do I need zoning review? Because part of what I am required to do in looking at that is, okay, what may have been in that building before, the hardware store, is now being converted to a restaurant and dwelling units above, and actually I think some additional commercial space there. We needed to do a full review of that because it's still commercial. It still is, all of those were allowable uses, but we now had to address how is the trash management for each of those uses going to be handled on the property, both internally and then externally out to the street. We had to address if there's any other storage or accessory building needs that needed to be considered as part of that project. We had to address signage associated with each of those uses. So all of those issues did require us to sit down with the developer and say, okay, how are we walking through this? What are we trying to achieve? And how do we get you there? Lastly, if you're going to start disturbing the land in some significant quantity, and I don't mean putting in a little side garden of 100 feet. I'm talking if you're putting in a driveway, if you want to put in a house, you want to put in a commercial building, you're going to be seeing my office, and then you're going to be seeing Jeb's office for that as well. Because again, we have issues with the Chesapeake Bay Act that I have to address, and we need to ensure we've got a plan of development for the property before you start disturbing the land. Part of this is trees. If you're going to remove any trees, yes, that is part of land disturbance. We will have a role in playing with that. We have no issue if you are going to trim, prune, or maintain your landscaping on your property, but if you're looking to take down a tree, in the historic district in particular, you do need to see us before you do that work. Because this town did adopt a tree ordinance, a tree preservation and conservation ordinance, because we are a tree community now, and we are trying to preserve our tree shed, and we have requirements. If you're going to take one down, the reason has to be founded under our ordinance and viable, and then there has to be a replacement plan to restore those trees as well, somewhere on your property. Bay Creek has much stringent standards on landscaping, and actually I defer to the ARC, the Architectural Review Committee, to enforce their components of their preservation and tree component canopy, with one exception. If you are looking to take down trees as it relates to the Chesapeake Bay Act and the RPA, you're going to be seeing me, not the ARC. It is me. As I mentioned, signage is a big component of what we do, and that's everything from a business sign to you want to put up signs at your property. If you haven't been in this community and you haven't noticed, we had a sign war this past summer over we love our tourists or we dislike the STRs. All of that actually did not require sign permits, but the size and the placement of those did get administered and enforced by my office to ensure that they stayed in compliance with the sign requirements and the sign ordinance. If you're going to, as I mentioned, do any exterior renovations in the historic district, that is their purview and oversight. The historic district does not review anything relative to the inside of your renovation project. That is not what their job is about. The only time we will ask what may be occurring on the inside is if it has an impact to any of your openings, windows, doors, things of that nature. Because we understand that sometimes people want to renovate their kitchen and they want to change where the sink was, and so that requires change in the window placement on the house. then at that point, you've then hit the historic district, because we're going to want to know, now you want to change where the windows were placed on that historic structure, and you want to move them somewhere else on the wall. We are going to have a role in that decision. As I mentioned, we oversee all the docks, piers, beach walkways, bulkhead improvements. All of that comes in under my office. Again, most of those do require review by the various boards we have. It could be the Historic District Review Board. It could be the Wetlands Board, or under the Chesapeake Bay Act, that falls fully under my responsibility. One of the things that we wanted to ensure you had today, in case you weren't familiar, we have forms for everything. We love paperwork. My staff adores it. So in the back of the packet, we tried to give you a copy of all of our forms, but we've also been trying to push almost all of this out onto our website. So if you haven't been to the town's website, I encourage you to go there. It's www.capecharles.org. Under the planning and zoning page, we have all of our applications available there. They are all at the point that they are now fill-in forms that you can just open up and start filling in, and then you can email those into us, or if you feel a need to, print them out, get them signed, and then email those back to us for submission. Building and Code also has their applications up on their page as well. We've been working on the planning and zoning side of things to really provide additional information to make it a more robust informational site for you. So for example, if you work in the historic district and you get contacted about doing a property development, and you're trying to find out, is that a historic structure? Is it what's called a contributing structure in the historic district? You can actually go look yourself now. We've got the whole inventory list that was the town did with the historic district up online, both when it was first created and its revision. So both of those are there. They're the same places that we're going to go look from a staff perspective to give you that same answer. So if you want to go find it out early, you can. Any questions so far? Okay. Again, for those we had a couple new people come in, please help yourself to coffee and juice and ask questions as we go. So, as I've mentioned, the Historic District Overlay, it is a significant component of the work that my office oversees, because it encompasses all of the original part of the town. And so when I say the original part, we've given you the map. If you can see the purple line, everything within that purple line is within the Historic District Overlay. There are some components that are not in the Historic District Overlay. So for example, I know it's going to be hard to see at the very corner here at the bottom in the green area, where the public bathrooms are. I'll start there. They're not in the Historic District Overlay, believe it or not. The love sign is not in the Historic District Overlay. As I work my way along the beachfront, if I go all the way to the far end and I hit Washington Avenue, you're going to see there are several developments on the other side of Washington Avenue that are not in the Historic District Overlay. The old Coast Guard station, which has now been converted over to the Dreams by the Water subdivision, that is not in the Historic District Overlay. There is the, Seabreeze Apartments that was over there. They are not in the Historic District Overlay. And the Bay Vista development, which is, believe it or not, I know people tell me, no, I'm wrong. I'm really not. It is part of Bay Creek, believe it or not. It is in the Bay Creek PUD ordinance still, and it is governed by that Bay Creek PUD ordinance, and it is not in the Historic District Overlay. So just to give you a clear idea, everything else is in the Historic District Overlay. So that does mean if you're going to do any work on the outside of the property, please talk to my office first. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to require a permit, but we will walk you through that process so that you don't run afoul of the law. And that's really our job, and what we are trying to do is ensure that you know exactly what's required, and we want to get you approved as quickly as we can. Some things I can now approve administratively in my position. Some things require going to the board as a whole, and that is the Historic District Review Board. In both my world and for the Historic District Review Board, we actually issue what's called a certificate of appropriateness. That is a type of zoning approval that we are providing you. You do need that certificate of appropriateness for any work, again, in the historic district that deals with exterior work. For those who have experience outside of Virginia and any other historic districts, that is a term you're going to hear again and again. It is the common terminology you're going to hear in every historic district, whether that's in San Francisco, Savannah, or here. It's the same terminology, okay? So as I mentioned, we have a Historic District Review Board. It is actually governed under our zoning ordinance. So we created Article 8, which is the overlay district of that whole district we just told you and showed you. And they have responsibility for overseeing the development within that district, especially retaining the historic character and structures of that district. They actually do have oversight over new construction. We do deal with infill development. It is meant to be complementary, but not meant to be replications of the historic structures themselves. So with that said, the state code gives us the authority to have a historic district, and it's under 15.2-2306. Again, there's that stinky Dillon rule requiring us to have the authority to then have a historic district. And the town council adopted that district many years ago. Since it was in around the early 2000s, I want to say it was when the historic district first came in. Yeah. Most recently, we did do a revision to our design guidelines, which we adopted December 15th of 2022. You can again find those on our town website. In addition, we also put some bylaws in place for the board, for the Historic District Review Board, and to how they govern themselves and how they run their meetings. Because for those who may want to tell me some stories, I did hear them when I got hired initially, that the Historic District Review Board seemed to be a difficult board to get through, and it was received with dread when developers had to hear, you've got to go before them. We've been working to hopefully change that perception of them in the community and make it an easier and more understood process as to what they're looking for and what they're trying to achieve. And our guidelines were revamped with that in mind to actually give you, the public at large, and them clear understanding of what was their responsibilities and standards and guidance of what they would be looking for in any project. That board is comprised right now of 5 members. They are appointed by the town council. All 5 must be citizens of this town, and 3 of the 5 must be residents within the historic district itself. We hope to achieve some professional skill sets out of them. We don't always achieve that, but the state is asking us to try and seek people with these skill sets, and we've listed those for you. Whether they have a building background, architectural background, or some sort of professional background that would help us advance what we're trying to do in the historic district as a whole. That's what we're seeking when we're putting on members to this board. So what is the purpose? Why are we trying to do this? Because again, this comes up. Go ahead, Diane.
What determines a historic district?
What determines it?
Yes.
The town determined it when they did their inventory and then submitted that to the state, to the Department of Historic Resources, to establish what would be considered the historic district and its bounds.
So what were they looking for to say this is the historic district?
So when the first inventory was done back in somewhere around like 96, 97, that inventory happened. They went through and they just put down the history on every street, every building, every structure that was there. And they were primarily in that first round of doing the inventory was focused on the buildings, on the houses themselves, really not the garages or any accessory structures. It was the residential homes, the churches, libraries, civic buildings, and all the commercial buildings. And I think that took almost a 2-year process, and there were many skilled individuals who came in and helped to do that inventory and came in from the Department of Historic Resources to help determine what was the style of architecture for every building as well, and try and set a time frame or age when that building may have been constructed. And all that was submitted and compiled as part of that inventory process, and then submitted to the Department of Historic Resources. They reviewed it, and they helped set the determination that this would qualify as a historic district worth preserving based upon the criteria that the town had put forward. They felt that there was a charm and character and a style of what had happened here from an architectural development that they would like to retain and not have demolished over time. And the state agreed with that, and they allowed the town to adopt an ordinance, which we did, Article 8, the Historic District Overlay, establishing both its bounds and its intent.
Okay, I asked you that question because I'm looking at that houses that are being renovated and all at this particular time, please find way back. And the area has changed completely because some prices of houses have doubled and everything. That's why I was wondering, because I said, I don't know what is considered a historic district at this time.
Sure.
That's why I said.
Sure. And part of it is, the historic district is not meant to put a dome over things and stop development or improvements to happen. It was more meant to mark and commemorate what is perceived as the historic components that we want to retain. So if it's a Queen Anne style house, we want it to stay in the Queen Anne style. It doesn't mean it can't grow in its size or square footage, allowed under its underlying zoning district, but it is meant to stay within that style of home, whether that be a shaker style home, whether that be a craftsman style home, whether that be a ranch style home. There are some limitations to the ranch style home because really a ranch, one of the components of its definition is really one story. So considering putting on an addition to a ranch may not achieve that sort of approval, but we may look to them and say, can we achieve that additional square footage in a different way onto that property? Could it be through a side addition, something of that nature? So it doesn't mean that a house can't get larger or change in some confection or construction, but it has to stay still within the style of that home. Okay?
And Katie, the
Yes.
State Historic Research Department is also connected with the federal
Yes,
department as well.
yes, with the Department of Interior, yes. And
You're aware of that as well.
I appreciate that, Ed.
This all comes down from that source.
Yes, and if you're not aware of that, through the Department of Interior, and then the National Park Service, who also is one of their leading agencies responsible for maintaining federal historic structures in the United States. Many of that process and procedure rippled down to the states to allow them to set up similar programs, then in turn pass that on to the localities to preserve these heritage sites or historic sites within their community. So I did give you a whole slide that tells you the exact purpose of the historic district. I'm not going to read it for you, but there it is. It ties right in. I didn't plant Diane, I promise. You were right on top of it. I did want to mention, since I told you we had an original inventory of this town, a updated inventory was done in 2019 by some officials and residents of this town. They felt it was time to do an update. They wanted to consider, should we come back and look at some of the structures that we omitted in the first round? Should we start to expand the period of significance in which we're doing our historic district? Because it was defined back when that first historic district inventory was conducted, and it was set, I'm going to get this wrong, I should have written this one down, from when the town was founded up to about 1940 was that first period of significance. And as I mentioned, we didn't pick up all the accessory structures in that initial review. So when the revised inventory was done in 2019, they did two things. They did pick up many additional accessory structures in that inventory list. They picked up some that had not been considered in the initial inventory list because they weren't deemed old enough or of a character worth preserving in this community. As you may recall, Diane, some of Washington Avenue was not considered in that first round of when this historic district was created. But in the second round, that expanded the definition and the bounds of what the historic district was. And that's where we are today, is what is now shown on the map, that we go all the way to Washington Avenue, but we don't cross to the north side of Washington Avenue. And we haven't gone any further on Old Cape Charles Road. We don't go any further out on Stone Road, are not in the historic district either. So what are some of the things that they focus on when we're looking at the review in the historic district? It's everything. I'm not going to lie to you. It is everything. It deals with the foundations, your roofs, windows, doors, porches. From the commercial side, the storefronts. We look at cornices, masonry, your brickwork, wood, architectural metals, synthetic siding, paint, in terms of only painting as it relates to brick, which is a big no-no, but otherwise we don't care what color you paint your house. That's not under our purview whatsoever. We care about awnings on commercial structures. We are very much concerned with buildings that are not maintained and are heading towards the demolition stage, because we do not want any of our buildings that are historic to be demolished. We've actually had, for those who were here this past year, we moved a building in this town. It was an impressive effort. And if you have any questions on that, Gary Shackelford is here because he oversaw that project. We moved a property from on the corner of Mason and Fig Street over to Washington Avenue. We care about pedestrian walks and curbs, and we also care about some streetscape trees relative in the historic district. As I mentioned, there are two elements that get reviewed in our historic district. One we call the standards, which are the zoning ordinance requirements contained in Article 8. The other are our guidelines, which are in our guidelines book for the historic district. And so we have processes all the way through that in which we can do things as a minor review, depending upon the type of work you're doing, or it could be a major review that may kick it over to the historic board for them to review it. Ed?
Katie, is signs included in this?
The review that we handle through the historic board, or could be handled administratively through me, is really how the sign may be affixed to the property. So whether that's going to be screwed into the wall of a brick building, we're going to get involved with that. Or if it's going to utilize already a prior sign that had hung there and they're just replacing the content of the sign, then we can easily sign off on that. Go ahead. You seem to have another question.
It's not listed here, that's why.
You're correct, and it is one of the things that we do look at. It may not require or trigger Historic District Review Board, but any signs that go up in the community has to have a sign permit. That's a zoning approval that must happen, yes. I've talked at length on the Historic District Guidelines, so I'm not going to repeat this slide again, but you have it there for you that really walks you through it. So I know this is all clear as mud, this process of a certificate of appropriateness. I'm sorry if this is a little bit fuzzy, but this is directly out of our guidelines book, this graphic. So again, we do a local zoning permit. That's what we're issuing when we're doing a certificate of appropriateness. I do a zoning review to ensure you're in compliance with the zoning ordinance. And then we're going to see, okay, in the overlay district, what are the requirements that we have to ensure you address as well? So when I do my zoning review, I ensure you are in compliance first with the underlying zoning district in which your property is located. So if you're in R1, I'm going to check you for that. And I'm going to make sure all of your components relative to setbacks, if you're wanting to do an accessory structure, that it meets those requirements associated for an accessory structure in the R1 zoning district. And then we start bringing it over to the historic district side saying, okay, so now if you're going to do, say, an accessory structure, what's the roof pitch happening on that accessory structure? Is it in scale to the house size itself? Is the design that's being proposed for the accessory structure complementary to the house that's there that is a historic structure? So those are all the components that we're looking at. As I mentioned, we do not regulate or govern the color of any of the materials, buildings, etc. The only thing that we will weigh in on is if it is a brick building and you want to paint the brick building. That is not, I'm not going to say it's not allowed. It is highly discouraged. We actually had an application before us just last night before the Historic Board who wanted to paint the brick on this house. And unfortunately, that was not approved. It was not a issue that the applicant was ready to die on either. So it wasn't that it really had to be done. We ended up working with them and talking about some repointing and other improvements that could be done to the brick to make it look better, which is really what the property owner was trying to achieve. And so we worked to a solution last night at our meeting. So what's the process? So as I mentioned, depending on what you're doing, we will ask you to come in, fill out a form for us, and tell us all the work that you're trying to do. And some of it could be minor action. It may not even require any further approval from the town offices whatsoever. Or it could be a minor approval of administrative review that I can sign off on. That may take a day or so just for us to get our paperwork in order and go out and just proof and check what you've told us is happening on the property, and we go do a site visit to confirm everything. And then we can issue a certificate of appropriateness. Others, as I said, may require a major action that has to go to the Historic District Review Board. So with that said, we've then given you the process. If it goes down to the Historic District Review Board, what does that entail? We have a slew of paperwork. I'm not going to lie, we have lots of paperwork. We have broken them out depending on what you're trying to do. So say if you're looking to do a re-roof in the Historic District, we've got a one-page, maybe it's 2 pages, application for historic re-roofing. That can generally be done within the day, maybe 2 tops. and then hit over onto the building side and get their building permit application for re-roofing as well. If you're looking to do an addition, we have a paperwork for that. Or if you're looking to build a whole new house in the historic district, we got a different form for that. Part of what we're asking is when you look at our forms, for those who aren't familiar with them, they're detailed. They're going to ask you, okay, what's your roof material? What's your window size is going to be? What is your door size is going to be? What's the material for those things going to be? We will walk you through every component of the elements of your house to make sure you're giving us the information needed to get through the board on the first go-round. And actually, before your application even goes to the board, staff is looking at it, and we're probably going to do at least one, if not two calls, and then if not an in-person meeting with you to review your application, ensure we have addressed everything, and actually highlighted to you issues that we know the board has had on other properties that you may want to be aware of and consider how you're going to approach it, or potentially look at a redesign or resubmission on that element of your house project. So we are doing our best to ensure that when you go to the board, we get you through on the first go-round. Yes, sir.
Question. Just generally speaking, if I was doing an addition for someone in a historical district,
Yes.
what's the average, if I have all my forms correct and submitted, what's the average turnaround time?
So if you get your paperwork into our office and it's absolutely correct, by the first Tuesday of the month, I will have you on for the very next month's agenda. And they meet on the third Tuesday of the month. We could get you approved then. So 2 months. Yeah. So that's part of when we actually, even in that 6 weeks window from when you bring your application in to when you get onto the calendar and the packet goes out to the board, we are in constant communication with you to say, this is what we still need from you. We need you to tweak this. And we actually write up a staff report for every application that comes in that goes to the board. And so we're working with you the whole time, all the way up to the meeting, to see if we can get to the point that we can recommend from my side of the table of all the zoning issues that they get resolved and are addressed before we go to the meeting. And we can tell the board, you're good to act from a zoning perspective. There's not one thing holding this up. They will then review it from their requirements under the guidelines, and we will then work during that meeting, even when a bone of contention comes up, and some of our contractors here have just recently been through this. I'm not going to name names, anybody. We have a couple of pet peeves, maybe it's the best way to say it, that the board is looking at. So for example, they want to ensure there's a certain thickness to the windowsills if you're replacing windows. They're going to ensure you meet that requirement in the guideline as to what that thickness is. If you haven't done that in your submission and your client is so insistent upon a particular style of window that does not meet our guidance documents, we're going to do our best to try and help convince the client they need to bring it in compliance with the guidelines, or that's going to be an issue raised at the board, and they're going to continue to push back and work to achieving that. Occasionally, some of these will be a desire or an experience level that's being expressed from the board, saying in their experience and what they have seen in the district, that particular material may only have a lifespan of 10 or 12 years. It may not be your best choice. You may want to consider something more. It doesn't mean we won't eventually approve what you're asking for, but we're trying to also put them on notice. You could be coming back to us in another decade or so looking for this change, because that material really doesn't hold up.
The board meets once a month.
Once a month, yes.
Thank you.
Yep. So then, once you get your certificate of appropriateness from us, a couple of things to know about it. There is an expiration or shelf life to a certificate of appropriateness. It is 6 months, and you may think, 6 months, I can't do it. It will continue to have a life as long as the certificate of appropriateness is put into motion. So as long as you're making active progress on it, it continues to live. It actually runs in tandem with the building permit cycle. So as long as, and most of the work we're doing does have a building permit component with it, so we run in tandem with them. And so if a project totally stalls, and there's not any foundation work going in, no footers being up, no sheathing inspections, no plumbing inspections have happened. If that project is totally stalled and sat there for 9 months, guess what? Not just the certificate of appropriateness will die, so will your building permit will die. So that is the life of the expiration of COAs. because we want you to get the work done. That's the whole point of this, is we want the project to happen. It doesn't mean if you have some unforeseen circumstances that you can't come seek an extension of the life of that permit. You can, both on the building side and on the certificate of appropriateness side. Occasionally, as you get into your project, you realize we had this plan, we now need to tweak our plan. So you can come request a modification to an existing certificate of appropriateness. So, but you do need to ask that in advance before you actually make those changes. Depending upon where you are in your project, I may be able to approve that again administratively, or I may have to inform the board. Some of that may be by phone call or email. We're sending out a notice saying this is what's going on. And while this technically will require your review, this is where they are in the project. We don't want to leave this giant gape in the roof. And we're going to go ahead and say yes, and we're going to ask you to retroactively approve this. So we do work with you to figure out what is happening, where you need to do a modification, and where that needs to sit to keep it moving forward for your project. The things that we are also working to put in place in our office is we do inspections now. So we will come out to ensure that you're building your project according to what we approved. Similar to that, what the building official is doing when he is out there with his permits, our staff will come out to check that you are constructing this in compliance with the C of A. And of course, we do have violations of the ordinance, and there's a whole process if we think you are not building to what has been approved. Most of you have seen these, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but a couple of you may have never seen a site plan before. So we wanted to put one in here just so you know what it looks like for us. We do require all this junk that's on here is necessary in a site plan. It needs to be prepared by a surveyor. I need to have the bounds of the property, of the legal description of your property. Where are your bounds? What are the structures that are currently on the property? And then they need to identify all the setbacks from all the front, rear, side property lines, and any other structures on the property. And then if you're going to do an addition, that needs to be shown on a different color where you want your addition to come in, so that we can see that's the proposed increased square footage coming in for that property that you're asking for. So that's what a site plan looks like that we need to sign and approve. As you can see, both myself and the building official signs off on this. As I mentioned, we have a tree permit application, so we provided you a copy of that. And we actually do ask, if you have a site plan like the one above that I showed you, show us where the trees are that you want to take down. We're going to need that. Elise?
This came up at the city league meeting, and I was curious if there's like a requirement for how recent the site plan has to be.
It depends on what you're asking to do. So if you're trying to put in a new house, you must have a current site plan. If you are looking to do a pretty significant addition or renovation to your project, we're going to need an updated site plan for that. If you're trying to do your trees, no. And that's, you're going to see on this page at the bottom, we allow people to just give us a sketch. Sketch out your plan and show us where the trees are located, and we'll accept that. We'll go out and take pictures, we'll verify what's going on in your property, and we'll be able to give you a decision on your application process. We felt it was important to tell you guys about, if you never heard it called this, the VDOT right-of-way, what we call the hell strip. Because there is a space that actually does not fall under our jurisdiction whatsoever. And it is that grassy strip of space between the road and the sidewalk. It is VDOT property. Actually, the whole sidewalk is VDOT property in this town, if you're not aware of that. All the roads are VDOT. They're not town-controlled roads. And the road dimensions are different on every road here in town. We have that listing in our office if you're ever curious to know exactly what they are. But for example, Beach Road is, I think, 100 feet? 100 feet. Mason is 70? 70 feet. So they're all various sizes, but the VDOT owns not just the road, they own that grassy strip, and they own the sidewalks as well. So when somebody asks us if they want to take out a tree that is in that hell strip, we have to refer them to VDOT. And then VDOT, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say they're going to give you the pass around, but sometimes they may defer to ANEC because it's where that tree is and how it's growing up may be impacting the power lines. And they're not just going to take down the tree, they're then going to get ANEC involved if that tree can be removed. And 9 times out of 10, they actually will never fully remove a tree. They will trim it like crazy to avoid that cost and expense. That's a conversation that you would have to have as the adjacent property owner, those negotiations with those agencies as well. So we wanted to make you aware of that requirement. Chesapeake Bay Act, I've talked quite a bit about this. So again, this gives you the entire principal requirements of the Bay Act. I'm not going to read through it in depth at the moment. I really do want to talk about the visual I have. Because this is really what I am looking at, and what I will mention to you as property owners, as developers, is the RPA and the RMA. So again, the RPA is the Resource Protection Area. It has two components. It is actually made up of a total of 100 feet of a buffer, and within that 100 feet, there's what's called the seaward 50, and then the landward 50. And there is a significance between those two. The state would prefer that all developments stay out of the entire 100-foot RPA buffer, but there's a recognition that sometimes that is not always doable. But what they are absolutely clear on is that first 50 feet, there will be no building, no structure, no nothing, no fence, no house, no pool, no shed, no nothing in that first 50. You might get some approval through a variance or a variance process. It's called an exception process under the Chesapeake Bay Act. In that second 50 or the landward 50, but it is rare. And so we really work with you when you come in as a development project to try and design the house so that it stays out of those things, that the deck stairway does not fall into the RPA. And I know you may not be thinking about that, but those are the things that I have to think about and keep those out of the Chesapeake Bay Act under the RPA. The RMA is a much looser application process in terms of it doesn't restrict development because, as I mentioned, a big chunk of this town is in the RMA. I'm going to pick on all of Bay Avenue is in the RMA. There are lots of homes on Bay Avenue, as you know. What they want from the RMA requirements is to ensure that we are not paving over everything. They really want to ensure that we are minimizing the impervious coverage that's happening on those lots when they get developed. So they are looking us to retain a significant chunk of that so that you're still getting rain filtration, groundwater filtration for the Chesapeake Bay and its rejuvenation and percolation. So those are the things that we are looking at when I'm reviewing the Chesapeake Bay Act. So, as I mentioned before, we had to identify areas of the RMA, RPA, and the IDA within the town. So the town actually did adopt a standard when this went into place in the 90s. That is the map. As I mentioned, around the harbor, we have identified much of that land to be intensely developed areas. I also referenced that we have the oyster farm, marina area up there is in the IDA as well. That gives them some relief from compliance with the Chesapeake Bay Act. Everywhere else, we have to adhere to the Chesapeake Bay Act.
Is there any height required minimum?
It actually is under the standards of the underlying zoning district, deals with the height requirements. So
The elevation can be 0?
it's possible. It's whatever is set under the underlying zoning districts, yes. There may be requirements associated with landscaping. There may be, especially around the harbor, there are allowances and relief provided for water-dependent businesses that can locate right up against the water, because whether that be an aquaculture operation or potentially other businesses that are water-dependent. A marina may be water-dependent for the boats, et cetera. So within the Chesapeake Bay Act, so I've given you a couple sections out of here. There's a lot in the Chesapeake Bay Act. It is hard to distill into just a 1-hour presentation. I'm doing my best. About buffer area requirements that we have to adhere to, about standards and responsibilities and all sorts of regulations that come with that. But these are just snippets out of our ordinance that we have to adhere to, so I wanted to provide a couple of those to you. We did have probably a unique case that happened 2 years ago. The corner lot of Bay and Washington Avenue, where the old ferry terminal used to be. There's actually going to be 2 homes over there here in the near future. We had to go through a very extensive process to approve that, because it was pre-zoning when those lots were developed or established, I should say. When zoning came in, the ferry terminal had no longer been operating there, so the town classified that as residential. And at that point, that means homes could go there. And then we had to figure out, most of that lot, those 3 lots in total, were actually all covered under the Chesapeake Bay Act, and they were in the RPA almost in total. But our zoning allowed a house to go there, and it was a lot that was created and adopted before the town ever had zoning, before the Chesapeake Bay Act ever came into being. And so we went through a whole process of an exception to get to the point where we could put a house there. In fact, 2 homes will be going there, and they're going to have some improvements to the shoreline and some docks and some other things that are going to happen on that property. So I didn't want anybody to be surprised the next year if you start to see activity in that corner area. Yes, but that has now been almost a 3-year process to get to the point where we're going to get a house there. So what can you do in the Bay Act? I'm going to look at the Bay Creek developers in particular, because many of your, not many, there's several of the subdivisions over there that have RPA consideration. And so you really can't just go wipe everything out. And I know a lot of people want the best visuals by the creek, by the water, etc. So you can't just take down the entire tree line just because your property owner wants it. There are requirements that have to be adhered to. And if you actually do take out all the trees that are at the RPA line, there's some trouble that could happen. And so far, our response has been compliance and bring back some landscaping requirements to address what should not have been removed. It doesn't mean it can't get turned into a greater fine or penalty under the Chesapeake Bay Act. Their fines and penalties are far greater than any one that is in our local zoning ordinance today. And when I tell you that, if you're familiar with any in Northampton County that they've done, some of those fines can be $10,000 or greater. So if you think you're going to do anything in the Chesapeake Bay Act in the RPA areas, please talk to my office before you do anything. That's all I can urge you to do. So we gave you a pamphlet that we have on our website about guidance for sight lines. So there can be some thinning and improvement of the sight lines, but it doesn't mean taking out all of the trees in that sight line. In addition, we've provided you the pamphlet that we also hand out that the state developed some years ago about that same thing, about buffers and the importance of buffers, because part of this is educating our homeowners, because we have a lot of people who move into this community who just are not familiar with the Chesapeake Bay Act and the importance of it. And there is real value to what we're doing here, because we want to ensure the quality of our water that everybody is out there enjoying and playing in and having a good time with. So I did provide a couple of our vegetation replacement rate tables for you, for those who are in this field and doing this sort of work as well. We do require a slightly more advanced investment because we want bigger trees, larger caliper trees to come in so they can get well established in retaining the RPA line. We don't want erosion, we don't want all that sort of sedimentation running into the bays or into the creeks itself. So I want to give you that information up front. So then, a couple other boards that you may get some interaction with is with our wetlands board. They have a purpose and need here. The primary thing that they're going to get involved with is dealing with riprap revetments, bulkheads, dredging, marsh tow sills, commercial piers, and other shoreline construction activities. All that requires a wetlands permit. There are some things that can be statutorily approved as long as they are not altering the contours of the dune. So when you're developing a private pier or dock or boathouse, as long as you don't alter that contour of the dune, you can submit your application, and it is a VMRC application. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. But then it won't require a public hearing to the Wetlands Board, and we can get you moving on your way pretty quickly for that. So, as I mentioned, all of this comes under VMRC at this point. So the state took a viewpoint several years ago. They needed to streamline the process. And so if you're going to do any sort of work right on the water or put in a pier or dock of any kind, you're going to need familiarity with this chart. The jurisdictional bounds. And I've given you a couple of these, but this one's a really good one because it really tells you who oversees what component of the water as it comes onto the shore. And so again, there is some complementary review that is going on. VMRC takes all the applications for piers or docks or bulkheads, anything of that nature. You fill out what's called a JPA, or Joint Permit Application, through the VMRC website. They, in turn, as soon as they get it, they fire it off to everybody that needs to see it, whether it's to the locality, to the county as well. They send it off to the Army Corps of Engineers. They send it off to Fish and Wildlife. They send it off to the bug people, and I can't think of that agency right this second, I'm so sorry. They send it off to everybody, and they coordinate all of the review responses coming back in from every agency necessary. So again, I'm happy to take any questions if you have a particular issue or project in mind, but that gives you the basic idea here. I did do one more because it just came in color. It was a little bit better and easier to read for me. So I just gave you two options of how we're looking at it here on the shoreline in particular. And our responsibilities. There's really no difference between those two that you just saw, but I just focused primarily on what we're looking at when I'm doing a permit. And then lastly, I address the Virginia's shoreline permit process so that you're aware of that when you do a JPA. So if it does require a wetlands permit, we have to do a public hearing within so many days. It is a 60-day requirement that we are into a public hearing, and we have been out to your site to review everything. And then we are hopefully reaching a decision either at that meeting or shortly thereafter in case we had some requests for additional information. Same thing if it required a VMRC hearing as part of this process. They have certain deadlines associated with them as well. And then Army Corps of Engineers, DEQ, and the other review agencies, they also have their stipulations and requirements to respond timely also. So that gets you through the primary permitting things that you would be responsible for. I did provide you what are the legal requirements when we do a wetlands board, because it is extensive, where we have to send that out to. I just wanted to end on, you didn't like any of my decisions. What can you do about it? So, as I mentioned, you have the power to appeal the decisions that I issue. So when I issue written decisions out to you, I also make you aware of your right of appeal. And you can appeal the BZA. And that can be everything you didn't like, some of the conditions that may have been imposed upon you, or if my answer was a no, you could have appealed that decision. If you need a variance, it is also before the Board of Zoning Appeals who oversees this. In this community, we actually don't have special use permits, and actually what we do have are conditional use permits. And this town has chosen not to assign that to the Board of Zoning Appeals to review and approve. That actually is a responsibility they have given to the Planning Commission, and then in turn to the Town Council. So that is the only difference in the legislative, is that the Town Council itself is responsible for conditional use permits. And then again, if we got something wrong on the map in an interpretation of where a district line may fall, you can appeal to the BZA to weigh in on that issue. So that gives you the parameters of the BZA. I gave you their statutes that oversee them. Because people ask, well, how do they consider variances? There is a statutory requirement in Virginia for consideration of variances. And so we have provided that. So first, I gave you 5 key principles to know about variances. And then lastly, I actually gave you the specific criteria that is in the Code of Virginia that the BZA is reviewing all variance requests from. So just because you'd like something to go there and it doesn't quite work on your property, that's not going to be generally reason enough for the BZA to say, yes, you're going to get it. They actually have very strict criteria they have to follow. They are a quasi-judicial board. They are an extension of the circuit court. And so their decisions need to be based in law, and it needs to be a rare circumstance, and your property must have such a difficult or challenging issue that there could be no further use of it without some variance or modification to its consideration. So we just wanted to make you aware of that. I included the last chart just because most people may not be familiar where the BZA sits in that process, so we just wanted to kind of show you where they are from the town council perspective down. The town council truly doesn't appoint them. They provide a recommendation that gets over to the circuit court judge, and he signs off on those appointments to that board. So just so you're aware, they're sort of under the town council, but not really under the town council control whatsoever. And I think that does it for me. I'm done. So I'll give us a 5-minute swap over for Jeb, get refreshments. Questions?
Is there anything in Cape Charles where the county has jurisdiction rather than Cape Charles?
No.
Well, here, let's say one caveat to that. From Eastville to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel is called Cape Charles.
Oh, yes.
That is not in our corporate limits of Cape Charles. Our corporate limits start basically at the brewery, including the north end of Marina Village and Bay Creek. Once you get out past Old Cape Charles Road, then comes Northampton County.
Cape Charles has its own Chesapeake Bay Board, its own zoning appeal, all that stuff.
We have its own Board of Zoning Appeals. We do not have a Chesapeake Bay Board, but nor does Northampton County either. They do not have a Chesapeake Bay Board who oversees that. That is handled through their staff.
It goes to the wetlands board.
Yeah, I think that's who they're using for the wetlands. Yeah. So. Connie?
Just the importance of the owner permission.
Oh, on the forms. Thank you for saying that. I should have started with those. As I mentioned, in the last section of this packet, we gave you copies of all the forms. We ask that you try and use the forms through our website, because whenever we update them, we put them up there immediately. So that ensures you are always keeping current and using the most recent form that we have developed. For those who've never seen the application for zoning clearance, we tweaked a few things, and some of the things that we did is we've now told you all the various zoning districts that are in the town proper itself, and then within Bay Creek, if you're developing there, because a lot of people don't know which zoning district they are in Bay Creek. So you really just have to look by subdivision, and then it will then tell you what zoning designation is that subdivision. And then we ask you to fill out the rest of that form, sign it, etc. If you are not the property owner applying for these permits to the town, whether it's to my office or Jeb's office, we require an owner affidavit for permission to represent. So if you as the contractor coming in, we're going to ask that you bring, and we require that you bring this form completed, where the owner has said, you, Howard Smith, you're not Smith, you're Simpson. I'll pick on you. Howard Simpson has the right to represent and do these things on my property, on my behalf. I've worked in other communities where, believe it or not, I've had development occur, and the property owner knew nothing about it. And that was a whole legal mess you don't want to get into. So this is something that we do require in this town. And it does need to be either with a notary that is applied to it, or if it comes with a power of attorney, or if it's part of a corporate document, LLC, that you are representing, I'm going to need something within that power of attorney or LLC documentation that shows who are the people behind that LLC. Because anybody could be behind Bldg LLC. I need to know you, Ed, are the man behind Bldg LLC. It's not his, I'm just giving his example. And then from there, we've got all the rest of our forms that we are looking. If you're not aware, we do require that all your taxes be current and that there are no violations on your property when you come in to apply for something. So you'll see a box that we have up on the top right that the staff is reviewing those things, and we will flag that to you and make you aware that has to be addressed before we can go forward with a permit. Connie?
Cape Charles business license.
And a Cape Charles business license. So again, as your contractor and your subs need to have Cape Charles business licenses. And those are annual licenses through the treasurer's office. Okay, I'm done. Jeb, you're up. Any other questions for me?
Five-minute break. Stretch your legs. That's fine. All right, we'll give you a call. Yeah, thank you. You got it all right there. Okay, let's start making our way back to our seats, please.
I'll do my best to repeat the question if you want.
Tell them a 9 square foot island is all they need. It's about this big. Butcher block size, that's all they need. Yeah.
Now for the fun stuff.
Yeah, okay. So So, Katie kind of gave you an overview of zoning. We're now going to get into a little bit more technical aspects of the building. This would fall. All right, anyway, good. So we all want to know what the inspector does all the time, right? I'm just hanging around. So we're going to get into a lot of the technical aspects of code changes for the 2021 code. A couple things before we get there. So we all know all new construction plans require a registered architect or engineer seal on them, along with a surveyor seal on the site plans. Plans for alterations are at the discretion of me. So sometimes an addition, I'll just a hand drawing, or an architect doesn't have to necessarily seal them. We still want a drawings to show what's going to happen. That's all at the discretion of me. So you just need to let me know. Ask me. I'll tell you what's going to be required. 2 sets of plans are required at submittal. One, they will get stamped and approved. You'll get one back that needs to remain on site. I don't care if you make copies of it, but it needs to have my stamp on it. That way I know that's the plan that I'm approving when I go to do inspections. If all the forms are not complete when some plans are submitted, you're not in the queue. You're not getting in line to get reviewed from zoning and building. We are inundated with building review right now. I mean, we're averaging between 15 and 20 sets every day that we have between Katie's office and my office right now. So you can imagine the amount of paperwork that's coming in that we have to decipher, and if it's not complete, we don't want it. All right, inspections. You all know about inspections, right? 24-hour in advance minimum, please. Sometimes I can help you out on the same day if you call before 9 a.m. Just depends. All right, only the contractor who has obtained the permit can call for the inspection. Northampton County doesn't do permits for all the trades like we do. So we require trade permits for electrical, plumbing, mechanical, gas, fire. They are required to call in their own inspections. And we always insist or like to have somebody on site when we do the inspection. If there's issues we can address, maybe we can fix them right there or get them fixed with a picture the next day. If I don't have anybody on site, I can't address that with the contractor, right? All right, down to the nitty-gritty. Virginia is currently under the 2021 Virginia Uniform Statewide Building Code. We have been there since January 15th of 24. However, the state allows you a year grace. So everybody who has been submitting plans up to this point has still been using the 2018 code. And you can continue using the 2018 code until January 14th of 2025. On January 15th, we have to go to the 21 code. Okay? There is a lot of changes in this. We're going to go over a lot of them right now. Now, what we're going to go over is not cumulative of every change in the code. I just pulled out the ones that I feel like most of you all could, use a refresher on. Will help us in the field, so there's not a lot of re-inspections required. So as you can see, about 115 we'll go over, roughly, out of 600 changes just in the residential code. Doesn't count the commercial code, doesn't count all the commercial trades. That's just the residential code. Let's see. Okay, so the next slide. So how do we get to the Virginia Residential Code? So ICC, which is the International Code Council, comes out with books every 2 years. They're really fast. Then Virginia takes the IRC, which is the residential code, makes changes to it, puts it in their own book called the Virginia Residential Code. So Virginia can take any code in the ICC, either amend it, delete it, change it, and make it a Virginia code. So it's important. all the contractors should get the Virginia Residential Code. Don't go get the IRC, which is the International Residential Code. There's going to be things in there that have been deleted or added on or changed that could affect, inspections or final approval. So as you see the big yellow Virginia, if you see any of that on any of those pages, that means that's a Virginia amendment. That means it was not changed at the international level, it was changed at the state level, okay? All right. Grade floor emergency escape and rescue openings. So I put this in here. We have a lot of basements in Cape Charles. Not typically are they used for any other reason but for storage or mechanical equipment. But I also left this in here because I feel like some of the bluff lots in Murfield could potentially deal with this, where you have, a partial story going into a hill. So it basically says that you have to have 44 inches, which is the same for a regular window in a house. It can't be any higher than 44 inches above grade for it to be considered an egress window out of a bedroom, correct? So if you have an emergency escape rescue opening, say, with a window well, that window well can't be more than 44 inches to be able to climb out of should you need to get out in an event of emergency. Is that clear? I got that? Okay, story height. So story height has been all over the board in the last few code cycles. And they have now given you an exception that you can go 13 feet 7 inches with engineering plans. Sometimes, I haven't really seen that issue a lot here, but it does give you that ability, just so you're aware. Townhouse walls. So left this in because we do have some townhouses going up in the fairways. Used to be that you had to carry your 2-hour rated wall all the way to the roof line. Now gives you an exception to stop that at the ceiling as long as you have two 2x4s running, separating that townhouse from the next townhouse. Okay. So now we're getting into chapter 3, which is general requirements. This is where the majority of your requirements for egress, stairs, handrails, guardrails, all that stuff. Really, chapter 3 is one of the most important chapters in the residential code. So we got mechanical ventilation. So used to be 0.5 air changes per hour, right? It's now going to 0.35 air changes per hour in habitable rooms. It's getting tighter. We all know, or if anybody's ever spoke to me about anything with these code changes, energy efficiency has driven 90% of the code changes in the last 3 code cycles and will continue to drive code changes. And you'll see that throughout this whole handout. Okay, so then a local exhaust system is an acceptable substitution for natural ventilation in kitchens. That's always kind of been a general rule of thumb for me. Not sure why they're really clarifying that in there, but I've always treated it like that. Ceiling height when it comes to beams. So you can reduce your ceiling height to 6 foot 6 inches under beams as long as they're 36 inches spaced apart. If they're less than that, you have to maintain the 7 foot clearance. Emergency escape and rescue openings again. This is kind of new, interesting, that you require a 36-inch wide pathway to a public way from the emergency escape and rescue opening. I don't really see that being an issue anywhere in town. I'm not real sure what the thought process was behind that, except for maybe row houses in big cities and stuff. So that one should be easy to comply with.
Is that paved or a stone path?
It does not clarify that.
It's open.
Yep, just open. And if anything gets more clarified with that, I'll be glad to let everybody know that for sure. Yeah, so going back to the one where we were talking about potentially in basements and window wells, you have to have a 36-inch wide and high path if you're going under a deck or a patio or something, if you need an emergency rescue opening under, first floor or below grade. It's pretty self-explanatory. All right, stairways and landing walking surfaces. So used to be that you could only have a 2% slope on any sidewalks, paver, patios, anything that led from your means of egress. Well, what they found was you could not get your proper grade away from houses if if a lot of the area was taken up with sidewalks and patios. So then it allows an exception in there to be able to drop that to 5% grade at landings to help water get away from structure, walls, whatever. Okay. It keeps beeping. Okay, smoke alarm locations. This is a pretty big change. So we all know that smoke alarms have to be in the general vicinity of bedrooms and hallways. They have to be in bedrooms. They have to be on one on every floor. So now it adds a new caveat that if you have a split level ceiling, as you can see the picture here, if you have a 24-inch difference in ceiling height, you're required now to put a smoke alarm at the entrance of the bedroom and at the higher ceiling height. Say it's in a living room or dining room or whatever. It's not one or the other, it's both. The thought process is, if you were just putting it in the one by the hall by the bedroom, what do we know smoke does? Smoke rises, right? So it's going to find the highest level first. So this is going to give occupants more time to be able to get out of the building if there is a fire. And we all know they have to be interconnected. That's a given, right? Any questions on that? Okay, smoke alarms near cooking appliances. That was always a big no-no. Well, they're now allowing you to go as close as 6 feet to a cooking appliance as long as it's rated for that use. So they're making smoke detectors that can be in close proximity to cooking appliances. They're not as, I guess they're not as sensitive. I don't know. It is not a requirement, but there are some instances, I've seen in old homes where they really don't have anywhere else to put them, or say the kitchen is right off of the bedroom, and we require a smoke detector within the vicinity. We've run into some nuisances like that, so not required though. Okay, photovoltaic systems. Everybody know what a photovoltaic system is? Solar panels. So there's been a lot of discussion with regard to first responder access to roofs when it comes to solar panel systems. So what they're saying is, this is a Virginia amendment. This is a Virginia amendment saying that you have to maintain an 18-inch clearance on both sides of the horizontal ridge for firefighter access. I approved a set of plans the other day for a solar installation in Marina Village East, and they were already complying with this. So I was happy to see that. All right, footing width and thickness. This is just some revisions. I'm not really going to go through that. It's important to have a book. Well, it's also important to have architects and engineers who are up on all the regulations. There's a couple tables for you to see. All right, foundation waterproofing. So 6 mil polyvinyl chloride and polyethylene fabrics are no longer allowed for waterproofing installations. What they found was that they were thinner than what really needed to be there, and they were getting torn and ripped and causing water infiltration. Vapor retarders. Okay, it used to be you could have a 6 mil vapor retarder under a slab. Now has to go to a minimum of a 10. That's a pretty big change. Deck footings. Okay, they've clarified some things in there, so there's a couple exceptions that they've put in. So joists supported on grade do not require footings. Okay, so at grade decks do not require footings. A small deck low to the ground may use concrete piers directly supporting deck joists. The exception limits these decks to 200 square feet and a height of not more than 20 inches above grade. Everybody got that, or do they need me to repeat that?
You say it again?
So joists supported on grade do not require footings. So if you're going to put a little patio, wood patio on the grade, you didn't have to have footings. All right, again, the code is a minimum standard, right? You can go above and beyond that. I would. I know most of y'all do. All of y'all do, right? Code is a minimum standard, so this is the minimum. This is not the maximum. All right, and the other exception is a small deck low to the ground can be supported on the concrete piers. The exception limits the deck to 200 square feet and no more than 20 inches above grade. Okay, this goes on for footing sizes for decks. Remember, we're in a 40 SPF ground snow load here. It's good to get the book. There's a lot of tables in the book. If you're not familiar with tables, you might want to get familiar. Or hire an engineer who's really familiar. All right, deck posts. So the post height table is expanded by adding a tributary area supported by a post and the wood species for determination of the maximum post height. So if you go to the next slide, there's a little table there. Tables are your friends. Just make yourself aware of that. I'm not going to really go any further than that. Okay, guardrails. So in the 2018, there was no requirement for constructing exterior guards on decks. Well, now there is. They found that there was not enough importance put in how they were being fastened, how they were being supported. People were falling through them and getting hurt and dying. So there are now some new requirements that they have to be, hold on, let me find it here. There has to be a load path from the guardrail into the deck. Typically I see that anyway, but just, read that section. Most of y'all who do final inspections with me know I walk around and push pretty hard on your guardrails. I'm a stickler on stuff like that. Anything that people can get hurt on, I'm a stickler. Am I going too fast? Everybody good? No questions? Good. Okay, soffits. So the requirement for soffit material and installations are expanded. This is really coming from hurricane damage over different, in Florida, Texas, Louisiana. There's just a lot of requirements now on whether you have to have, go to the next page, Katie. One more. There's now some requirements depending on the width of your soffit of whether you're going to have some intermediate nailing strips in there to help hold it down. I mean, we are already in a high wind zone, so everybody's kind of receptive to that already, and hopefully your designers have designed everything down to the soffits. I don't know. Never really dove into that until now that we got a codes change that's really making me look at that. So a lot of times the big issue I think is vinyl. I know a lot of people are using hardy, and I don't think there's as much of an issue with hardy as it is vinyl. So the next table is just about how to install it depending on your width. Keep going. Keep going. One more. Okay, we're getting into chapter 11, which is energy. Fun, fun. This is where you lose your profit margins. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? All right, so high efficacy lighting. There's a new definition, is that any lamp with an, any lamp with an efficacy of not less than 65 lumens per watt, or luminaries with an efficacy of not less than 45 lumens per watt. So that's just a definition. What it's going to tell you on, maybe not the next page, but a couple pages, is that all of your permanently installed light fixtures are going to have to be high efficacy. All of them. Not sure that that's probably an issue now. Does anybody think that's an issue now? Jim? Laura? Howard? I didn't think so, but they want that in there, that they don't want any more incandescent. You know, it's just burning too much energy. So.
High efficacy is anything that's not incandescent?
I don't know that it really gets into that specific, but I mean, what isn't LED anymore?
Nothing. So
LED is high efficacy, yes. Okay, so climate zones. So does anybody know what climate zone we were in? Anybody? Bueller? No, number, not color. Stop cheating. Oh my goodness gracious, what are we doing here? Come on. What? Nobody knows?
We're 8 now.
We are a 4. We are a 4. Okay? They did add another climate zone, but we do not fall into that. Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Chesapeake, all of them are now moving into a different climate zone, which is considered warm humid. We are still mixed humid. I don't know why. We should be warm humid. I mean, we should be hot, right? Hot humid. So just so you're aware, ours has not changed, although nobody even knew what the number was. So we're good. Come on. I'm not doing my job very well on this, guys. Jeez Louise. All right. So we have lots of compliance options when it comes to energy efficiency and rating our home, right? We have prescripted, which is, you know, R49 in the ceiling, R19 in the walls, R15 in the floor, you know, whatever. We have total building performance, which is a U-factor method. So for the longest time, or forever, the whole time I've been working in code enforcement, it's always been that you took the prescripted method, R38 in the ceiling, or R49, you know, R15 in the walls, R19 in the floor. The code has changed to recommending you go to a U-factor method as opposed to the R-value method. And I'll go over that in just a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, permanent energy certificate. You're required to post a permanent energy certificate near, my guess would be your electrical panel or your utility room. It must note all of the items on there. It's got to have your R values, your U factor methods if you're using that way, heating and cooling systems, water heaters, your air leakage, if you're using photovoltaic systems, and your energy rating if you're doing that. Got that?
You need a copy of this also in inspection.
Repeat the question.
Do I need a copy of this during my final inspection? I would like a copy of it to put in the file, yes. There are times when all localities are audited for energy compliance. The big cities have been hit a lot. I have not been hit at all yet. Well, here we go. It's on the internet now. I'm ready for it. I mean, that's fine. Come get it. Let's go. Let's go. Yeah. Just one more thing, right? So yes, I would like a copy of it. It doesn't have to be the original. It can be a photocopy of the original. My suggestion is laminate it, put it in a Ziploc bag, something. Don't just affix it to the wall. You know, I have a feeling these are going to be ripped off as soon as I'm out of there anyway. Let's just be honest. But at least I saw it there, and it was clean, and it was in the right place.
Other counties that I do this in, they're actually, that is a sticker. It's a, you stick it just like you would an inspection sticker to the back of a panel cover.
So the county provides that?
Yeah, in Maryland they do.
Really?
You can probably get them on, or I can break a bunch down.
I mean, that would be great. So where does it go in the panel? Because you got a labeling on the inside of the panel.
Yeah, well, you flip it over, usually it's big enough, there's 2 panels usually in the house of this size, and you usually have room on one or the other to stick it in that. Usually the cover side's fine, above the listing of the breakers.
That doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Repeat that, because, again, for the.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so evidently in Maryland, the state provides a sticker that will be affixed to the electrical panel to show the energy certificate stuff, and hopefully they won't rip it off. Yeah, I'll think about it. Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I put mine underneath of the kitchen cabinet currently. We've been doing it for 4 or 5 years.
Okay. You do that, or they do that prefab?
They do it. Anything we've added, we have to have the.
Which that's been a requirement for a long period of time when it comes to prefab homes, yeah. It's been it was a requirement last year, or last code cycle, but I have not been requiring it until now.
They started putting them in the panel, and then everything got convoluted in there, so we asked them to ship them somewhere else.
Yeah, let's discuss that one, okay? All right, building thermal envelope. Okay, the assembly U factor is now established as the primary insulation metric. The R value approach is now the alternative. Okay, and when you get to the well, let's not go to the next one. So the U factors are lowered and the R values are increased. Y'all ready to see the number for ceiling insulation if you go R value? You ready? Go ahead, Katie. Next one. We'll go back to that one. R60. Anybody tell me how many inches of insulation that is? It's got to be 16 or 18 inches of insulation. So what's that, a 2 by 20? Right? So go back to the U factor. So the code now is pushing you towards a U factor method. And the way the U factor method is done is not a method where you set a certain set of R value in your wall and your ceiling and your floor. You now have your designer design your house based on this table. Okay, we're 4, not 6, not 8. We're 4 except marine. Okay, we're not marine. We're 4 except marine. So they need to design this house according to this table. They take into account fenestration, which is your windows. They take into account your doors. They take into account your foundation material. They take into account your roofing material, okay? And then they're going to provide you with a calculation that's going to say, okay, you need to put R38 in the ceiling, and you need to put R19 in the wall, and R whatever in the floor to meet this whole overall method. Has anybody ever done that? Anybody ever done a house like that?
Like a res check.
Similar, but but a res check is done after the fact. This has got to be done up front, so you know and I know what I'm looking at when I come in to do an insulation inspection.
We haven't done
Okay. Yeah. Now you can still go R value method, but it's going to be tough. Unless you want to pay for spray foam everywhere, which to me, this is kind of starting to drive everybody towards having to do spray foam. The spray foam manufacturer is the one doing this. They're the one driving these code changes. Yeah, I said it. I'm not lying. That
Does that still need to be designed by whomever, spray foam, thickness, and the whole nine?
You can go the R value method with spray foam.
With spray foam.
Yeah, but if you're gonna do the U factor method, you can still do spray foam, but I got to have a sheet that tells me, all right, you need 4.5 inches of spray foam closed cell in your ceiling. You know. So this is going to be on your designer to design this. It's a big change, big, okay? And any questions? I mean, you know, everybody's got my number, so we can discuss this at any point in time.
If you're going R value, there's no reason you can't do spray foam on the perimeter until you get to a place where, happy place where you have the height to flow it.
Ask that again?
If you're going the R value method,
Yeah.
there's no reason why you can't spray foam like at the perimeter near the eaves until you get to some place where you have the height where you can blow the insulation.
Okay, the question was, if you go R value method, can I spray foam the eaves to get far enough out where I can get my R60 insulation in there? That is, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. A lot of people are encapsulating their attics anyway now, you know? So it's not going to be hard to add an additional, well, how many inches of foam does it take to do R49 right now? No, spray. 7 inches, so you're going to need what, another 4 inches? So you're going to need 11 inches. So if you're encapsulating your attic anyway, it's not a big deal. But if you're doing bat or blow in, you may want to go the U-factor method.
Who are you seeing do the report?
I haven't seen one.
Are you thinking an architect is gonna do that, or an engineer, or who's gonna, where's that gonna come, that information coming from?
I think either one could probably do it. Yeah, I think either one can do it, and they may sub it out, you know. Yeah.
Right now, the risk checks that we do are done by our insulating company. They have all the charts, they have the measuring sticks and all the cavities and this and that. I mean, is that res check, which you can actually provide that before you build?
Yeah, a res check is a little different than that, I believe.
Well, there's an area on the res check for a U-value score. There's 4 methods on there that you can choose.
But are they going in and taking into account every window and every door?
Absolutely.
I would be willing to look at that.
Okay.
But it's got to be pretty laid out, not just a number they've pulled out of midair and thrown on there. I want to know that it's done the correct way.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, does anybody think their insulation companies can do that? Yeah, I didn't. I mean, and your insulation company's from Maryland, right? So they may have hired staff just for that reason up there, because this might have been a requirement a long time ago in Maryland. So I'm not saying I won't entertain it. I'm not saying I'm going to approve it either, but I need to see it. Okay. Huh?
So I don't feel like doing it twice, so I'm not gonna ask that.
No comment. All right, so everybody got those tables? I know that's a big change. That's probably one of the biggest. Yeah.
Probably gonna slow the permits down in your office.
Well, I mean, so the question is, will it slow down permits in my office? I would have no problem getting you all to a permit as long as you submitted that to me before we got to any type of framing inspection.
So you're saying we could get building
I'm saying I would consider that. I would prefer it be right up front, but I am saying I'm not going to hold up, especially in the beginning when we're all trying to figure this out, okay? My job's not to limit what you guys do, okay? I'm just quality control, that's all.
Because we don't always know exactly how those roofs are going to end up.
Yeah, well, that's when you got to get your designers to do a little better for you. I can't control that. I can't control that. Look, there's always going to be times where we're going to have to make an adjustment or figure something out. And everybody here knows that I'm pretty flexible. Okay, ceiling insulation. So as we know that there's an allowance for a reduction in your insulation as long as it can go uncompressed over the top plate. That doesn't change. Okay? You can go R38 over the top plate, you can still, or is it R30? No. If you can go R30 over the top plate uncompressed, again with your air gap in there for your ventilation, you can still reduce that. Okay? Only up to 500 square feet or 20% of the insulated ceiling area, whichever is less, not more. Okay. R value reduction for walls with partial structural sheathing. So I never really saw this anywhere, but they've pretty much just taken that out. They're not giving you any R value for structural sheathing anymore. Floor insulation. There's 3 separate methods. Used to be all roped into one code section. It's now 3 different code sections on how you can comply with floor insulation. So you got cavity insulation underside of the subfloor, cavity insulation top side of the ceiling, or cavity and continuous insulation top side of the ceiling. Pretty self-explanatory.
I'm sorry, that's a good question. How does this relate to crawl space first floor? Do you have to put gypsum board on the bottom of your first floor, your crawl space ceiling?
No, that's talking about, no. That would be a garage to a living above or something like that. No, you don't have to put gypsum in your crawl.
You have to in Talbot County.
Really?
Yes, sir.
You have to put drywall in your crawl space.
If it's an engineered TDI or any other engineered subfloor, any other radius. And that is,
Even if it's an unconditioned crawl space.
absolutely.
My goodness, what would we talk about mold and mildew here if we did that?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Talbot County.
Are they, what climate zone are they in?
I don't even know.
Come on, Jamie.
It was yellow. It was yellow.
I mean, I can't believe, that would be a nightmare.
It was the same as ours.
Oh, okay, so they're 4A. That's insane. How many callbacks do you have, people calling you back for mold and mildew on that?
I haven't done one with that new code. I did prior to, but he said the next time we do one, the next code cycle, he's enforcing.
Oh, so you've not done one
I've not
yet?
done one yet, but he said the next time.
Good luck with that. I think that's crazy. It'd be okay in a conditioned crawl, but you talking about unconditioned crawl, the amount of humidity we have here, everybody knows that. It's just not going to work. I'm a practical guy. That just doesn't make any sense. Air-sealed electrical boxes. So all boxes in the thermal envelope now have to be sealed. And they have to be marked with a NEMA OS4 or OS4 mark on them. Don't we love energy? Don't we love it? Okay. Pretty self-explanatory, but Virginia felt it needed to be noted. Heat pump is your primary heat source. Can no longer have electric resistant heat or baseboard heat as your primary heat source. I don't run into that here. I'm sure a lot of big cities do, but everybody's using heat pumps here, just so you're aware. The idea is it burns too much electricity. See a common theme yet? Okay, duct installation. Clarifies the requirements for duct conceal within continuous air barrier in the building thermal envelope. So this is basically showing if you wanted to do uninsulated duct. I don't recommend it. We all know how humid it is here. But it has to be in the conditioned space. We all know that, right?
So that drawing only applies to non-insulated duct?
Correct. That drawing only applies to non-insulated duct. Okay. Duct testing. A lot of you all are already doing that, but it now clarifies that all ducts and air handlers, even entirely within the building thermal envelope, has to be tested. All ducts, no matter where they are, have to be tested. So if you remember a couple code cycles ago, it used to be they gave you 2 methods. The visual method, which allowed me to come and actually see all of the connections before they put their insulation wrap on, or duct blasting. There's no visual method anymore. It's all duct blast. Okay? That is different than the blower door test. Blower door test is, if I were you, I would do duct blast way before I got to final inspection. Blower door is right before final inspection. Or you can do 2 blower doors like some contractors I know. So, which is fine with me. All I need is 1 certificate.
You don't require that duct class prior to covering.
I do not.
You recommend it?
I recommend it. I mean, especially if you have something in a concealed space that you're not going to be able to get to at a later date. It's going to suck if you got to pull out a wall to reseal a duct because you didn't test it before you covered it up. Y'all do, Joey, y'all do yours at rough before I go to rough in? Everybody else do the same?
I think it's required in the county, right?
It's going to be, it's required here now too.
Now,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, this just keeps talking about ducts within the thermal envelope. Okay, mechanical ventilation systems now require testing. So they need to be verified to provide the minimum ventilation flow rates required by section 1103.6. All right, get ready to make y'all upset. Lighting equipment. New provisions require all lighting, interior and exterior. Well, all right. New provisions require lighting controls for interior and exterior lighting. When we get to interior lighting, all lighting has to have dimmer controls or some type of thing to save energy, with the exception of bathrooms, hallways, which I include stairways on that because that's a part of a means of egress. I'm all about safety. Exterior, go back. Exterior lighting fixtures, which has their own section, and lighting designed for safety or security. That's a big change. That's a big change that's all going to dip into everybody's pocketbook, right? Because we know how much dimmers cost. Does anybody have any questions about that?
All of this, Jim, all of this is related to January, permits pulled after January.
All right, the question is, this relates to permits pulled after January. You can apply for the 2021 code right now. It's in effect. But like I said, you get a year grace where you can continue using the previous edition. I don't know why you would go to the 21 right now unless you wanted to. Yeah. Any questions about that?
Your office is going to be busy. And dimmer is the only way to control.
So it says, with a dimmer, an occupant sensor control or another control that is installed or built into the fixture. Dimmer, the only way I see it really being working is a dimmer. Most people don't want a motion controlled thing where, you know, they walk out of the room for 5 minutes and their light's off and you got to walk back in to cut it back on. Bonnie?
Cabinet lighting, pendant lighting,
Is it low voltage or is it high voltage? So the question was lighting, cabinet lighting, lighting under countertops, blah, blah, blah. My question is it low voltage or is it 110? If it's 110, it has to be on a dimmer. If it's low voltage, we don't really regulate low voltage. The code does not regulate low voltage. So in my opinion, no, you don't have to have it on a dimmer. I want my lighting under the cabinets on a dimmer, but that's just me. That's a big change, guys. It's one you got to start thinking about now. Okay? All right, exterior lighting. It gets more fun. Don't wait. Don't worry. All right. So where the total permanently installed exterior lighting power is greater than 30 watts, the installed exterior lighting shall comply with the following. Shall be controlled by a manual on and off switch that permits automatic shut-off actions. Exception of multiple dwelling units. Shall automatically shut off when daylight is present and satisfy the lighting needs. I see that in a lot of fixtures now. They're doing dust-to-dawns on them, right? And then controls that override automatic shut-off action shall not be allowed unless the override automatically returns automatic control to its normal operation within 24 hours. Y'all decipher all that for me and let me know. It's very confusing. Any questions on that? Yep.
Are we still under a dark skies compliant community or is that been?
Are we under a dark sky compliant community? We, as a whole in the town, are or no?
Never been.
We've never been? Okay. I'm even wrong on that because I thought we were. We are not. Bay Creek is? Is that?
Bay Creek may have, within their design guidelines, that requirement.
But not a
essentially
state, federal dark sky compliant community, yeah.
In the current zoning ordinance, all it indicates is they'd like us to be dark skies compliant. That's never defined in the ordinance, so that's why it's really not a dark skies compliant community. We are proposing new language in our zoning ordinance, revisions that are out right now to do that very thing. To direct all lighting down onto the ground, to ensure that you don't have any glare that falls onto another property, things of that nature.
Ms. Davis?
Question, when you all regulate, I know for some reason that everybody seems to, I used to call them party lights, because I thought they had them on for the party, but these lights still on all night long, they're around the house, completely around the fence, that they do have.
So you're just talking about like security lights or like a floodlight?
I thought that like they were having a party, that's why.
You're just talking about, yeah.
They're on all night long, do you all control that also?
We do not. Question is, do we control party lights in backyards? We do not.
So people just have to grin and bear if the lights are coming.
I would be like, shut off the lights. Tell them, Ms. Davis. You get them.
I don't have a problem with something. Okay.
All right, next section just talks about total building performance, which is kind of what we addressed with the whole U-factor energy certificate, blah, 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 okay? So we need to make sure that everything is meeting a higher energy efficient rating to your HVAC units, to your water heaters, to your insulation values, to your windows, your roofing, everything, okay? Everything is coming down to energy efficiency. All right, keep going. All right, this is one that is interesting. So most of our custom homes in Bay Creek, we're seeing large ranges, exceptionally large, 6-burner, 8-burner ranges. So what the code now says is that cooking appliances designed, tested, listed, and labeled for commercial occupancies are no longer allowed to be installed in dwelling units unless they are designed for also domestic cooking operations. I have never looked at any of the manufacturer's installation instructions for any of these ranges that you guys are putting in, but I can imagine some of them probably are not designed for residential settings. So it might take a little while to catch up for these manufacturers, but my guess is they're going to get the labels on these ranges to be able to sell them to residentials. But something you need to be checking. And I'm going to be checking it. Okay? That's a big change too. No. So what it's saying is you can't have them in a residential setting at all. Period. Unless it says it is also for residential use.
Rest assured, the labels will be out December 30th.
Oh, I mean, they're probably already out because you can, in the state of Virginia, again, 2021 is already in effect. So anybody who chooses could be already building under the 21. They could already be building under it. January 14th of last year, 15th of this year, right? All right, getting into some plumbing. So I've always done general rule of thumb, 10-foot head pressure on drain waste testing. Well, they reduced it to 5 feet last code cycle and have now brought it back to 10 feet. I don't have anybody busting my chops on whether I make it 5 feet or 10 feet. So just a change everybody should be aware of. Okay. Drain waste and vent systems can now be tested on vacuum. That's a pretty big change. Never been allowed before. I'm not sure anybody's going to want to go that route, but they could. It says, portion of the test shall be evacuated of air by a vacuum type pump. You achieve a uniform gas pressure of -5 pounds per square inch or -10 inches of mercury column. Shall be held without the removal of additional air for a period of 15 minutes. Okay, big change. Guess what it drives back to? Energy efficiency. Length of hot water piping from your hot water heater to your fixture cannot exceed 100 feet. Period. Yes, sir.
Or to a recirculating line.
Question is, or to a recirculating line or loop. I'll have to get back to you on that one. My guess is that's okay, but let me see if it tells me anything here.
That's what the
And
diagram
is
says.
it an on-demand, like a Renai or an Avian, or are you talking about an electric hot water heater?
I'm talking about from your hot water source to your fixture line, in the line, 100 feet max, period.
Even if the manufacturer says it can go farther?
Doesn't say that in here. What did you, no, I'm sorry, what did you say, Reese? Recirculating line.
The diagram suggested that 100 feet is measured from the recirculating.
Yeah, let me just dive into that a little bit, and I'll put out a clarification. Yeah, I'll put out a clarification. I believe that's okay, but let me get you an answer on that. But you know, for those who aren't putting in recircs, it's 100 feet. So it really makes you think about where you're putting your hot water heater, right? Especially on these massive homes. You know, you're putting it in the attic. It's a long way from the attic to bathroom, all the way across, all the way down 3 floors, right? So requiring you to centralize your water heater a little more, or potentially put in a recirculator. Solvent cement, CPVC. Virginia amends the option to use green solvent now. Used to be, it had to be yellow, right? Now allowing green. Just the manufacturer put enough time and effort to get that changed so you can now have green. That's just my opinion. All these opinions are expressly of mine own nature. Please don't take them to heart. Removable fixtures and traps is cleanouts. So it now allows you to treat that as a cleanout if it's removable. So a trap under a sink can now be used as a cleanout. All right, here we go. Electrical. Big change. Go back. Big change, okay? Before, we used to be able to set the meter base, and as long as you were within 6 feet of the meter base, you could run your panel in interior without a disconnect. That is gone. You are now required to have an emergency disconnect at the point of entry, no matter where your panel is. This is a safety thing for first responders. Me as a first responder myself, I can appreciate this wholeheartedly. You know how many house fires we go to and have to physically go in the house to try and disconnect power before we can touch anything. It's very frustrating.
There's a transfer switch still?
Transfer switch is still considered a disconnect. Because you can open that box up and drop that. That's a disconnect, yes. It must also be labeled as such. Has to be a nice red sticker with white lettering. Emergency disconnect, you know. Well, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure there's a million different ones out there. But I think it just has to say emergency disconnect or something. I can't remember exactly, but. Surge protection. You're now required to fully surge protect your entire electrical panel. No exceptions. Driving it up, right?
Affordable housing.
Driving it up. This is a good one to me. You know, this is a good one. These little surge protectors you're putting behind your computer, they're failing all the time. They're not stopping electrical strikes anymore. You know, you got $10,000 worth of TVs and $50,000 worth of appliances. You need to protect that. You know?
Trump the arc, or is this specifically just for, the arc breakers?
Does not trump the arc breakers. No, that's still, yeah. The arc fault and surge protection are two totally different animals. They really don't even do the same thing. Any questions on that? I know y'all are loving me. Okay, bathroom branch circuits. So what they're trying to do here is clarify that the only required receptacle outlets, or the only ones that have to be on the dedicated 20 amp bathroom receptacle circuit is the ones that are required. Go back, Dave. The ones that are required at the sink or at your countertop. So if you have circuits along the baseboard or wherever in your bathroom, they do not have to be on the dedicated 20 amp circuit. Okay. It's kind of another clarification. This is when you get into kind of small bathrooms. So, receptacles shall not be installed within a zone measured 3 foot horizontally, 8 foot vertically from the top of the bathtub rim or shower. So you see, go back. You don't want any electrical outlets in that yellow zone. All right, so what if we run into a situation where the bathroom's small, so small that we can't make it any other way? Well, it gives you, the next page gives you kind of a catch-all of how to make that happen. Okay, so what it says is, go back. I don't know why it keeps going up. So we want it the farthest room away from the shower or tub stall. So code says you have to have a receptacle in the bathroom, right? So if you can't meet the 3 foot, you get it as far away from the bathtub as possible, right? Everybody got that? Garage branch circuits. Okay, only the required receptacle outlets must be on the 20 amp dedicated circuit. So basically what the code says, you're supposed to have one receptacle per bay, right? So you could get away with running them on a different circuit. I don't even know why. I don't even understand the thought process behind this. It's just saying that you could have your, if you got a 3 bay garage, the 3 dedicated for each bay have to be on the 20 amp. The others could be on a different circuit. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. All right, Mr. Hammond. This is Mr. Jamie Hammond with Gateway Builders. Said he's only here for this one section. So he said he can leave after this. Kitchen, countertop, and work surface receptacles. On an island, you have to have one receptacle for the first 9 square feet and one for each additional 18 square feet. That's a big change. You guys putting in these 40,000 square foot islands are in trouble. I will say, however, the next code cycle, they have taken them back out completely to where you don't have to have any. Well, the thought process is the cords were creating more of a hazard for children than not. So they were just saying, well, we don't want you doing anything on the island anymore. Because a cord could be hanging over if your receptacle's over here or whatever. Kids were pulling stuff over, getting burnt, getting hurt, getting killed. So basically what they said on the next code is you take them all out and you just aren't allowed to do any electrical there. You would do your electrical on your peninsula or regular countertops.
What year is that? Can we apply for?
Hold on, let me finish. Let me finish. I am setting myself up for disaster. Okay. The building code allows me to write a code modification based on a newer code. In this instance, if you don't want to put any receptacles in, I will grant a modification for that fact. Okay. So it's either you meet the requirement or none. We're not doing in between. It's either you meet the requirement, 9 square feet for the first, 18 additional square feet for each additional, or you do none. Okay, there's no in between. So that's how I'm going to treat that. Yes, sir.
The receptacles over and overhang count.
Say that again, I didn't hear you.
The receptacles under and overhang.
Do receptacles under and overhang count? They do if they meet certain criteria. I believe it's less than 18 inches overhang. There's 2 or 3 criteria you must meet for it to count.
And there's no spacing for this?
There's no what's spacing?
No spacing requirement for the island receptacle?
You have to meet, I think the intent is you have to meet the, well, I mean, if you only have one, it doesn't matter where you put it. That's true. All right, so no, I'm not aware of a spacing requirement.
So to put them all next to each other?
I don't know if that's the intent. I'd have
It is either, but-
to get back to you on that one. Yes, sir, Jim.
In the next code, you're saying that there are no receptacles in the island. Does that mean we don't need them? Or does
Means
that
you
mean
don't-
they're prohibited?
No, it means you don't need them. You're not required to put them in. Again, the code is a minimum standard. You can't go any lower than minimum. You can go, you can put receptacles in there if those people request them.
Yeah, that's fine. When you mentioned the cords and that.
But I believe most people will err on the side of not wanting them at all because they're a pain. We all know that everybody wants everything beautiful. Well, they make everything look ugly. You don't want to see a receptacle, or then you got to cut it into the countertop or cut it in the cabinet and it doesn't work, and then most people will be like, all right, screw it, I'm done. Somebody else have a question?
Will you count a quad as 2 receptacles?
Oh man, y'all are killing me. I don't know. I haven't even thought about it that far.
One more question. When we're somewhere between 3 and 4 receptacles, are you going to round up to the 4th or round down to the 3rd?
The question is, if I get in between receptacle counts, will I round up or round down? The general rule of thumb in the building code is you round up. If you're over that number, you go to the next one. Okay? Even rounding. Yeah. So it's probably going to put a lot of paperwork on me because it's actual paperwork. You all have to come in and apply for a code modification based on that address. Paperwork for you, then I have to approve it, and then that's paperwork for me, and it also is attached to the CO. So it runs with the life of that property. Any code modification that I write, most of y'all probably aren't even aware of that because we don't really get into a lot of that except in commercial settings, but I feel like I'm going to see everybody in my office for a code modification on this one. Okay? Any other questions about that? Okay, Mr. Hammond, you're good. You can go home now.
Yes.
Oh, gosh. All right. Kitchen countertop and work surface receptacles. Oh, did I skip one? No, go back. There we go. Okay. Countertop and work surface receptacles in kitchen areas cannot be counted as the required general purpose wall space receptacle outlet. So if you have a 2-foot wall space between your cabinets and a door, the receptacle on top of the counter does not count as your general purpose outlet. You got to put one in there. That's pretty self-explanatory. I guess they're just clarifying it. All right, y'all gonna love me on this one too. GFCI protection. It's no longer limited to 120 volt receptacles or anything. Now got to put them on dryers. Now got to put them on ovens. Okay? It goes up to 250 volt appliances or 250 volt receptacles now up to are now required GFCI protection. Your electrician's going to have a lot of call outs. A lot of call outs. Yep. Anybody know what a GFCI breaker costs for a 50 amp dryer or oven plug or dryer plug? I don't imagine they're cheap, right?
That's HVAC too?
No, because that's not an outlet. It's not where you plug something in. That is tied directly in. That does not count HVAC. GFCI protection for basement receptacles. Basically, this says doesn't matter what the space is being used for. It's got to be GFI protected in a basement. I just threw that in there because we still have a lot of basements, you know, in the old town. We don't see them anywhere else just because of the water table. But just so you're aware, if you're dealing with that anywhere else. All right. GFI protection for indoor damp and wet locations. So all utility rooms are now required to be fully GFI protected.
It's not necessarily mud rooms if it has a sink or something like that.
A wet location, yes. So that could be a washing machine, could be a sink, could be a dog wash station, could be a, you know. Okay, so Virginia, in its infinite wisdom, deleted GFCI protection for outdoor outlets. Explain that one to me. All right, the only explanation I got was that it was more dangerous for people to go outside in extreme conditions to trip, to reset an outlet or a breaker, and they were in extreme conditions than it was to potentially them getting shot. You can't make this stuff up, right? Again, it's a minimum standard. If you want to put in GFCI protection, feel free. Okay? If you want to cover your own butt as a builder, you can do it. It just says you don't have to. Right? I am done. Okay. Any questions?
I just got a comment. With over 600 total changes, how much time is that going to add to your inspections?
Repeat that question.
All right, so in one of my first slides, it said over 600 changes. How much time is that going to add to my inspections? For the first 6 months, probably a little bit. After that, everybody will kind of be up to snuff. That's the reason we wanted to do this, right? So we get 90% of our builders in one spot and say, all right, here they are, okay? Let's try and work on this up front, not in the back end where I got to say, failed, I got to go back, failed, right? So that's the whole reason we did this, all right? Any other questions?
Is this book available online?
It will be available online. This presentation's online, and that's yours to keep. You can make copies of it or do whatever you want.
What is the last date that your office will take a permit that could be issued under the 20?
January 14th, 2025. The last date that I can issue a permit under the 2018.
No, but they bring the paperwork on the 14th, your office is not issuing it on the 14th.
No, but it is considered submitted. I've always treated it, as long as it's in my office fully submitted, okay? Everything intact. Actually, Connie, you got anything you want to say?
No.
Okay.
We're sticklers for paperwork. We cannot move forward unless you have everything on your paperwork that we require. It's not going to go anywhere, and it will not be considered acceptable if it shows up missing something.
Both zoning and building.
Yes.
All right.
You have to return it. The more contact we have to have with you for your packet of information, that's the less time we have to spend on people that are, they legit have their ducks in a row, they're ready to move on.
That's all I got, guys. Appreciate y'all coming.